Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is the 29th episode of the 2025 season, and after a 3-week break from the sport, it is back on our televisions as we head deep into the Ardennes forest for the Belgian Grand Prix at the Spa Francorchamps track. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and I'm joined today by Vignesh, a returning guest, and my co-host Daniel. So thank you guys for coming on and joining me for this first episode after a bit of a break for sure. I want to start because we are kind of at the midway point of the season. As crazy as that sounds, it feels like it's gone very quickly. Let's talk about what we have seen so far and what our assessment is of the title battle at the moment, because it's undeniable that we have one on our hands between the two McLarens at the very least. Where do we see that so far? Who's currently what assessment can we make from the title back challenge so far? Starting with you, Daniel, what have you made of it?
Well, it's been great to watch, I have to say. The back and forth in momentum between the drivers has been brilliant to see. I don't know, I feel like on the whole this year, Oscar Piastri has been stronger, certainly in terms of racecraft, when you put Max Verstappen as the benchmark, but also in terms of pace on quite a few weekends, more than we expected coming into this year. He has been able to best Norris in that MCL 39. But having said that, Lando Norris has come off the back of winning his home Grand Prix and, for the first time in his career, 2 Grand Prix back-to-back within a season. So has he kind of wrestled that momentum back? I think Spa's going to be a great proving ground for it. Probably on track for pole in 2021 until that crash. But we've also seen Piastri be mega there. He led the sprint race, 2023. And last year, he looked much faster than Norris on the whole, who made a silly mistake at the start of the race, which cost him. So this is the point where we really get to see who's on top of that car, because this is a very car-dependent track. So it's very much up to the drivers to make the difference on this high-speed, commitment circuit that we're going to now.
Vignesh, I guess my question to you is leading on to that. Do you share that kind of sentiment that there's probably been over the course of the season a slight upper hand from Piastri, but it still remains mainly in the balance? Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I know there's no denying the fact that Piastri's had the edge over Norris over the first half of the season. But it's nice to see that Norris has picked up his confidence over the last few races, as you mentioned, winning back-to-back races in Austria and his home race in Silverstone. I think the noticeable thing is the fact that we actually got to see them race each other, I think quite closely, at least in Silverstone and Austria for the first 20 laps. So that was a good thing to see as a neutral. And I think ever since they introduced a sort of balance upgrade, I think before Austria, during the Austrian Grand Prix, it's sort of the car balance is shifting towards Norris. So that's good to see that he's gained his confidence back and we're able to see 2 top drivers fight it out. Personally, looking ahead to this weekend, I would back Norris despite Piastri's better performances last year, finishing second last year after George's disqualification and the sprint race, as Daniel mentioned. But overall, I'm looking forward to the second half of the season. I'm pretty sure there'll be a couple of more incidents coming our way, and as a neutral, all I can say is I'm excited.
Their close proximity between these two teammates has made for this championship to be pretty interesting. I would also say that Norris has probably had his luck on his side, I guess. I'm thinking Monaco, the lock up into turn 1 could have gone far messier. He ended up winning that race. If it had gone out another way, he may have retired. So I would say that he's probably in a little bit luckier out of the two, but I do have this feeling that it will balance out at some point as well. So I don't think it's too much to think about. In terms of the momentum point, because you guys both mentioned he's come off, Lando Norris, I should say, has come off 2 consecutive race wins at his home Grand Prix and the one prior. But do we think that momentum is less of a deal after the fact that we've had a 3-week break from racing, I guess? Do you think that does have an impact on potential momentum swings?
I mean, you could look at it 2 ways, right? You can think it's a bit of a reset. They're going to have 3 weeks to go, and some of the drivers have treated it a bit like a mini summer break. They've gone off on holiday somewhere and they're just resetting for the next part of the season. Or you can think Lando Norris has had 3 weeks to celebrate his momentous victory at the British Grand Prix, and he's riding high, and the team are going to love him because he's just won their home Grand Prix for them, and it's all going well. So from that perspective, I guess you could say it depends on the driver as to how they handle that momentum. I think Lando Norris is much better than he used to be at kind of composing himself and remaining neutral going into a weekend now. So I think he's just going to be able to put it aside for a moment and kind of use the secrets that he's explored and exploited within that car and bring them to Spa. Whereas Piastri is just kind of on a neutral plane with the car the whole season, and he hasn't had to go digging for those answers. So I think it definitely depends on who can kind of wrestle that the kind of, I don't know. It seems like quite a tough car to kind of discover what's going on with it and how to drive it and how to exploit the maximum from it, especially from Norris's side. So I think that momentum will kind of help him in telling him he's going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, Norris has made it very clear that he struggled with that car early on. Vignesh, do you think it was those troubles early in the season can be attributed to just the car struggles, or do you also think it was also a little bit of his own performance as well?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. As Daniel mentioned, I think the car during the first few races of the season was quite quick, but also had its struggles when it came to its balance or working in certain operating windows. So the fact that they managed to smooth those issues, it's a good thing for both drivers. And I feel like Lando maybe carried a bit of his mental block or issues from last year when he was struggling to fight Verstappen on track. The fact that he's able to sort of fix that issue. I mean, we've still seen it at the early start of this year where he had some difficulty getting past Verstappen in Miami, whereas Piastri played it quite smart for Verstappen. So maybe once he's realized that Verstappen pulls these moves off, I think it's made his life much easier. And now he knows that the car is much better than the Red Bull or Ferrari. All he needs to do is battle his teammate. I feel like he knows where he's at, and pretty much the only competitor that he has for the title is his teammate. So I'm pretty sure he'll be motivated to continue his good form. And I just wanted to touch on the fact that Piastri would be extra motivated as well, despite not having momentum, given the fact that according to him, he was robbed because of the 10-second penalty that he got for erratic driving under safety car. So he felt like he was quite robbed at Silverstone. So he might be extra motivated to fix that mistake and get one back at Norris. It is home race. Technically, Norris is half Belgian, so he'll be quite motivated as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's ultimately how the driver's mentality to this break, how they've approached it and stuff like that, how that changes and how that differs from driver to driver. Let's look ahead specifically to this weekend now. Now, we've mentioned this idea of momentum between these two drivers. Do we think, again, it will just be a shootout between the two McLarens there, or do we actually have any confidence in some of the chasing back to kind of to get involved and get stuck in here?
The driver who I'd have the most confidence in taking the fight to McLaren is definitely Max. Just because this is simply his track. He said it's before that it's his favourite track. I mean, he's qualified first for the Grand Prix here for the last 4 years in a row, and the average margin that he's done that by is over half a second, which is huge by modern Formula One standards. He didn't get the official pole position a lot of times because he's had engine penalties in the last 3 Grand Prix. But I remember in 2022, he won from 14th on the grid, which was just insane. So, if anyone can do it, Max can. And it reminds me of a quote from Jacques Lafitte, I think it was, about Gilles Villeneuve. He said, I know no human beings can perform miracles, but Gilles made you wonder. And sometimes you think about Max Verstappen and you think about that pole lap in Suzuka and the first corner at Imola, and you just think, how did he do that? But having said that, I think this is going to be a miracle too far for Max Verstappen because, like I've already said, Spa is a car performance limited track. I remember Bernie Collins saying, sometimes you do some strategy simulations in Spa, and no matter where you started, you always finished in the same position because it's just according to car performance and car pace with that low downforce setup that you have to run. So unfortunately, even for Max, and especially for everyone else in the chasing pack, I think it's going to be a tall order to challenge the Papaya cars.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people may roll their eyes when you said Max in there, but unfortunately, that's just the way it is, whether you like it or not. Verstappen is the closest person to really pull off miracles, right? I don't think we can attribute much else to anyone outside of maybe him and Lewis, who were capable of doing that on a surprisingly consistent basis. So it's no surprise when you mention him as probably the closest challenger, because let's be honest, Vignesh, right? Out of the Mercedes and Ferraris, they really haven't been able to be there up at the front end of the grid too often. They've always been once kind of flash in the pan performances from both teams. Do you expect this to change at a track like Spa, or is it going to be the two McLarens versus a potential Max in your eyes as well?
I back Daniel's stance on the fact that Max is probably the sole guy you would trust to take the fight on McLaren's, especially in Spa, given his track record and given the speed demon he is around the track. I would like to throw George in as well, despite the fact that Merck has had troubles when it comes to dealing with extreme weather conditions. I feel like they perform really well in lower temperatures. So let's say, given the weather that we have forecast, like it's going to rain. It's probably going to rain over 3 days. But if it doesn't rain and it's just overcast conditions, I would back a sneaky P2 from George in terms of putting the car up there. Whether it performs in the race or not is a different story. If it's smaller, then the Mercs are absolutely screwed. I'm not backing the Ferraris to put up a fight here. I genuinely think one of the Ferraris might take a grid penalty for, I don't know if they've reached their maximum engine allocations, but I would back one of the Ferraris to take like an engine penalty at this point, because I feel like there's no way they're taking the fight to the McLarens. Even with the upgrade, I don't trust it, because every time they bring an upgrade and they try to put numbers out there, they're just setting themselves up for failure. So I just rather hope that the car is more stable and drivers can understand and try to provide them with better balance and confidence rather than just providing inflated numbers and then setting them up for failure. So the only two names I could personally throw out would probably be George and Max.
I mean, it is very easy to forget. You brought up a good point. I think ultimately, I don't think he's got the car underneath him, but George Russell's been remarkably consistent this season in that car. So he deserves a shout out for sure, but unfortunately, I just don't think the Mercedes car is going to be there unless the temperatures are low enough for them. And I think you kind of nicely brought up the idea of weather. Let's talk about that a bit, because as usual, Spa does tend to bring up some interesting weather, to say the least. And looking at the forecast for this weekend, it also promises to have at least some wet weather sprinkled in. Spa is kind of a microclimate as on its own because of its location. And so we could see some very unpredictable weather here. Now, we're recording this on a Wednesday, and the weather forecast from today kind of is saying that there's a good chance of rain on the Friday and a good chance of rain on the Sunday as well, with a reduced chance on the Saturday. Now, obviously, the stuff can change very quickly, but if it is wet, as we are as it's predicted here, what cars do we expect to be a little bit more competitive in that type of weather? Are there any people that we need to look at and focus on as like, okay, if it is wet on the Friday, for example, for the sprint qualifying, what could that mean? Who can bring up a little surprise with that weather?
Probably the number one car. I mean, I know I've already glazed Max Verstappen, but if it's wet in Spa, I really don't see anyone else who's going to take it, to be honest, unless Red Bull put on the low downforce setup again, like they did in Silverstone, and make that abysmal error, but I'm not sure they will. So,
Daniel, give me an interesting answer. Don't give me Max Verstappen. We've had enough of him.
Well, the only other drivers I could think of, I'm just reminded of Oscar Piastri in Silverstone pulling 15 seconds on everyone else when it was a torrential downpour. But I don't think that's a very interesting answer anyway. So I'll go Nico Hulkenberg. How about that?
See, that's what I like to hear. That's what I'm trying to get from you. None of this Max Verstappen glazing because we've heard enough from him. Vignesh, is there anyone else that you're looking at highlighting here as okay, we should look out for him and if it is wet?
Lance Stroll. I feel like that man is made for driving in the rain. I genuinely think he turns into Senna when he smells rain in the air. I've critiqued the man quite a bit for his poor performances in normal like conditions or dry conditions. The moment like the track becomes where I feel like he's definitely one of the top five drivers in my opinion. I genuinely don't understand how it's possible for somebody to be so mediocre when it comes to normal conditions or struggle, but as soon as it's wet, he just I don't know. It's honestly baffling, but it's also great to see at the same time. Like in Silverstone, he was P3 at one point, and I'm glad that Hulkenberg overtook him, but I genuinely think he might be in for good points if, let's say, Ferrari mess up or one of the Mercs were to mess up. So I'd back Lance Stroll.
I think that's like a sentence I would never really say on the. I don't think it's ever been said under at least my role as host of this podcast. Someone saying I back Lance Stroll, and that seems like a very unique sentence. So you get the award for most unique sentence, I guess. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I think another thing to take into account is just we might have a few upgrades for this weekend. I'm aware that Ferrari have bringing a pretty substantial upgrade package to this weekend. Now, I think we know what hopes we're gonna have for them because I think we've made it very clear that we don't have a lot of faith. Vignesh, I assume you agree with this, right? There's a lack of faith or lack of trust in Ferrari in their upgrades. I don't know if do you agree with that or because it's something that we kind of share.
I do. Yeah, I do. Sorry, I do agree on the fact that there's a lack of faith in terms of the upgrades that Ferrari are bringing. As far as the reports are concerned, the reports I'm getting from Italy was the fact that both drivers have mentioned there's not a lot of difference that they've noticed when it comes to new upgrades. So I'm keeping my expectations low, and the data suggests it's not more than a tenth or so. So I'm keeping my hopes low, and given that it's a wet weekend and it's a sprint weekend, it's going to be difficult for Ferrari to, find the right setup or try to figure out if the upgrades are working. Even if it was a normal dry weekend, it would normal like dry weekend without the sprint, it would have helped Ferrari understand where the car is performing well or where it's struggling at. But given they only have one free practice session, I think it's better as Ferrari fans to keep your hopes low and just hope the car, finishes both cars finish in top five or top six. So anything above that is great. Anything below that, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Keep your expectations low and you'll never be disappointed, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean,
exactly,
that's the message. That's the message we have to talk about Ferrari.
To be honest, I think because their major difficulty this year has been their ride height, post China after the double disqualification, kind of spooked them a bit. They were going safe with the ride height in a lot of races prior, and the setup window that they were putting it in was not optimal. But this was the upgrade. This is the upgrade package that's supposed to at least go most of the way to rectifying that. So the way I see it is this upgrade could it be a key? You'll either put the key in the lock and it'll turn and the door will open, or the key will break and you'll just have to go to the 2026 door. That's the way I'm seeing it. So it's kind of make or break for Ferrari season at this point. We are gone halfway in the championship. I'd just say throw it in the bin anyway and just focus on next year. I'm sure they are from this point because the upgrades would have been devised far in advance. But I'm not entirely hopeful. And even if it is a miracle, the Constructors' Championship is still a very long way off for Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could get up in arms and get excited about it, but it's just tough to hear all about upgrades and fill yourself with any hope when history has proved, at least in modern history, that it's just not worked out particularly well for them. There was another couple of changes up and down the grid, I guess, because they're kind of related. And I'm talking about the Red Bull family because it's the first weekend where Christian Horner will not be at the circuit, heading up that Red Bull team. He left his post, obviously, or was sacked, which you can look at it a couple of ways. But the point is, they're under new leadership now, under the kind of head of Laurent Mekies, who was the former team principal at RB. Now, do we expect any change this weekend because of that, or will it be the same old, same old? What do we think?
It's going to be a Red Bull 1-2 because of it. I'm calling it now. Laurent Mekies comes in, adds a second to the car in qualifying, and then Max Verstappen wins by 3 minutes at least.
I'm glad that we're going really realistic with the predictions here, but I assume that the real answer behind that is not really. It's not particularly going to change anything on a day-to-day.
Yeah, no, absolutely nothing. I think if everyone else is in their positions, which I think they pretty much are, then it shouldn't change much at all. This is Laurent Mekies' insert yourself in the team and see what low-hanging fruit you could possibly pick up, and then build from there once your kind of apprenticeship internship period is over and you know what to do in the team. Then you can focus on elevating them and getting back together and fixing the second driver issue and everything. But I think at the moment it's just observe, learn, and take notes on action, but don't quite act yet. I think that's in the stage he's in. So I don't think we'll see Mekies' the fruits of his labor for quite a while yet. Certainly not this weekend. But I have faith in him. I think he did very well at Racing Bulls in the short time he was there. So I know it's a very different kettle of fish, but in the terms of people management, it's not that different. So it's not too dissimilar. So I think we should just be patient.
And the flip side of that same coin is with Mekies leaving his post at RB to go to Red Bull, we're looking at a new team principal there too, with Alan Permain being the person who's picked up that role. Vignesh, do we, given the fact that RB have been pretty consistently in the middle, in the midfield, which has been pretty hotly contested, might I add, this season, do you think a change like this could mean a lot for a team that is in and around the points? Because the 5 points off Sauber or Kick or whatever you want to call them, they're level on points with Aston Martin. They're only 7 points ahead of Haas in ninth. Do we think that having a change like that, going from Mekies, who I would say has had a successful time at RB, to Alan Permain, do you think that might negatively affect them? Not looking at this weekend specifically, but over the rest of the season, do you think that's a possibility?
Maybe I might be in the minority when it comes to this opinion, but I think that Alan Permain might be an upgrade because I've had interesting opinions about Lawrence Mekies because as a Ferrari fan, I feel like he's had some involvement in some of the sketchy strategies that Ferrari had when he was working under Mattia Binotto and the start of Fred Vasseur's career at Ferrari. And I feel like people might have a short-term memory. I don't blame them, but at the start of the season, RB had a couple of dubious strategy calls, and I feel like Mekies was partly to blame for it. So now that Mekies is gone, I feel like RB strategy might be slightly better. I'm in the minority. I feel like I'm in the minority, but I think that RB might get some sort of motivation boost. But if you were to look at it from Red Bull's perspective briefly, I think it actually might help Sonoda because I'm pretty sure Lauren Mekies was backing Sonoda at the end of 2024 to get that Red Bull seat ahead of Liam Lawson. So it might help boost Yuki's confidence in terms of Red Bull. In terms of RB, I think it might help them. You guys might disagree. It's completely fine. But I've seen some of the blunders they pulled in China at the start of this year. So I think it might be an upgrade for them. And it might give them a boost heading into this weekend.
I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting opinion. Would you, I guess, Daniel, do you agree with that there could be a boost to RB with the appointment of Alan Permain? Because I was of the opinion that it was more of a downgrade, but I don't know if you disagree with that. I don't know.
I mean, it is a very interesting point that you raised, Vignesh. It is certainly a coincidence, maybe, that Ferrari were obviously plagued with those strategy decisions while Laurent Mekies was there, and then he moved to Racing Bulls, and they had the worst strategies of all time at the start of the year. Laurent Mekies' role at Ferrari was sporting director and deputy team principal. So myself, I don't think he was in charge of those woeful decisions. I think it was more a fault of communication and it might have been Iñaki Rueda, I think, was in charge of strategy at the time at Ferrari. So I'm not placing the blame at Mekies's door. In terms of racing balls, I don't know what they were doing there, to be honest. But I think I'm willing to give Mekies the pass on this one. I mean, if Red Bull throw out a 3-stop on the extreme wets this weekend, then we know what's going on. But myself, I don't see it. In terms of Alan Permain, he's so experienced in Formula One. It's hard to find a more suitable replacement who was already embedded within racing balls. You'd have to hire from outside. There'd be some suitable candidates, but Permain obviously is familiar with the structure. He was a race engineer for a long time. I think he was a trackside director for a while as well at various teams. So obviously in that period, he would become acquainted with the team principal at the time and their sort of roles. So yeah, it is an interesting one. I'm curious to see how he gets on, but like I said, learning phase.
And I guess the secondary point was that Vignesh mentioned was also interesting about the fact that Tsunoda might get a benefit here, because I think we're under no illusion here. He has desperately struggled over the last 6 or so races in that team. I felt though initially there was a little bit of an improvement coming on Lawson, but over time I think he's just slipped further and further away from what we should be expecting from a Red Bull second seat. Do we actually think that this appointment might comfort Yuki a bit here? Because like Vignesh mentioned, I think Mekies was a guy who liked Tsunoda and felt like he should have been the one to take the seat over Lawson. So I guess, Daniel, do you have any opinion on that side of things? Do you think that this might lead to a bit of a boost in form, a much needed boost in form, might I add, for Tsunoda?
It's quite possible, because Christian Horner, during his tenure at Red Bull, he made it very clear that there was a number one and number two driver. And when you are that number two driver, after a while, if Horner's openly admitting that to the media and the fans and everyone who watches F1, to what extent is he going to work during the weekday and promoting that sentiment as well within the workforce, in the development directions that they take? So the thoroughness of the number one driver situation at Red Bull is such that no one could deny it, right? And I'm not sure what stance Mekies is going to take on this, how he wants to lead. I'd imagine he'd want to reduce that extent a little bit, because just look at how it's been with Tsunoda, like you said. But I'd say Tsunoda, given that he does know Mekies, he will take some heart in that Mekies will do right by him, but also right for the team in that sense. So it is entirely possible that it's comforting for Tsunoda to see that he's got someone who backs him in his corner, and will maybe treat him on slightly more of an even keel. Obviously, it's Max, so you can't expect to be on a level plane with him, but more of an equal than perhaps Christian was presenting him as.
It's definitely an angle that's worth discussing, which is why I kind of like a very unique and a good, it's a very worthy point to make from Vignesh. I think that's it in terms of personnel changes. And ultimately, I think it's time for us to dive into our prediction segment of the show. Now, our other co-host here, Lucy, isn't here, but she has also shared her predictions too. So we've got 4 sets of predictions to go through today. Vignesh, as you are the guest, would you like to kick us off with our predictions this time?
Sure, thank you. So I believe so for the sprint winner, I've gone Lando Norris as the sprint winner. I back him over Oscar Piastri, given the momentum he's had, and given it's going to be potentially wet sprint qualifying and a wet sprint race, I would take Norris over Piastri. And I'll just throw in a little bit here. I think Norris has won most of the wet races this year, so that's something that we should keep in mind. And for the main race in P1, I've gone Lando again, followed by the other McLaren in Piastri. P3, if Red Bull go with Silverstone's setup, I would back. So I'm going to say George Russell because I feel like Red Bull might make a mistake and go with the Silverstone setup again. P4, Max Verstappen, still his track. I wouldn't back him any lower than that. And then finally, P5, Lewis Hamilton. My DNF for any potential DNF for this race,
Well, we'll
maybe
do DNF
Charles.
and we'll
Okay,
do
sorry.
DNF
Yeah.
and random prediction after. It's all good. It's all good. Who do you say is your P3 again?
P3 would be George. George
Okay,
Russell.
got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you so what the result that you said would give Lando Norris it would mean that they'd be equal on points after this race, I believe, because there's an 8-point gap between the two, and between Norris and Piastri. I think that would mean that they would go level into Zandvoort, which would be an interesting outcome for sure. Daniel, how about you? How about you? How does your set of predictions stack up versus Vignesh's?
Yeah, some similar thinking. That similar thinking being that McLaren are going to be very strong. For the sprint win, I have gone for Oscar Piastri because there's been a sort of trend this year. Maybe not so much in recent races, but the trend was that McLaren are rapid on Friday and then get caught up over the course of the weekend. Obviously, with the one practice session, they're then in Parc Fermé until after the sprint, which is Friday and the first session of Saturday. So I think their advantage will be probably locked in there. And then for the Grand Prix, I've put Piastri again as P1. I think they'll be strong for the first 5 sessions of the weekend, not just the first 3. Oscar said it himself, it's his favourite track. I think he posted a video on social media of him driving on the track in the sim, and then just kind of waffling about why he likes it so much, which is quite entertaining. P2, I've gone for Norris. Yeah, McLaren, woohoo, strong. Win by 30 seconds maybe. And then I've got a kind of Noah's Ark thing going on. I've put Leclerc P3 and Hamilton P4. Maybe Noah's Ark is quite apt given the weather we're going to have. I don't know. But Verstappen P5 I've put, which if it rains, I'd expect him to get higher than that. But as I am skeptical about the rain, I'm going to put Verstappen in P5.
I mean, it's funny that you are skeptical about the rain. I think it's absolutely, there's reason to be skeptical because we see so many times the F1 biosphere being a factor where we, for whatever reason, don't get rain on our circuit, even though it's predicted to. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'll go and do mine and then Lucy's now. So I'll go through mine. What I have decided, I've also leaned in the way of, I was going to say lean in the way of Norris, but I've put Piastri as our sprint winner, but I've said Lando Norris wins this race. I just think that this is the type of, I think the form that he's displayed so far, I think there's no reason it can't continue. And I think this would also fit in terms of his, Norris has been always the person who's improved the most during that European segment of the season. And I think that's like a trend that's going to continue for the next couple as well. So I've put him as the winner. I also think Piastri will finish second. I think those two McLarens are too far away from everyone else, actually. I think they've got such an advantage that I think it's the safest bet and the most realistic bet as well. So I've gone those two as the top two. So that's that. I've gone for my third place. I've gone with Charles Leclerc. For whatever reason, I think I'm skeptical about this rain coming in as well. I could see it not coming in at all on the Sunday. So we'll see how that happens and how that develops, because I don't think if it doesn't happen, maybe the Ferrari has the straight line speed. Who knows? I think Verstappen fourth. I can imagine this being a weekend where he just complains about the car, because once again, the car underneath him is not fit for a driver like him. Unfortunately, I think it doesn't deserve a driver like Verstappen in there. And P5, I again just out of pure desire to throw a spanner in the works here, I've gone Fernando Alonso in fifth. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but yeah, I just wanted to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. And
that is interesting. I will say that. His highest result is 7th this year.
A little bit of a hint of what's to come, isn't it? Let me go through Lucy. I know that feels particularly surprising, but I think there's a glass ceiling, is what I'm saying. I think he's going to smash that glass ceiling here. For Lucy, she has leaned. I don't get how and why she said this, but she said Hamilton is the sprint winner. I don't know. In what she said to me is because vibes. So take up with her. Interesting take for sure. She put Piastri in first. She believes that he'll take home the win, followed by Leclerc. So another person showing a bit of faith in the Monegasque. She's put Piastri first, Leclerc second, and Norris in third, which would mean Piastri's eked out a further lead in that Drivers' Championship. She has put the two Mercedes drivers in fourth and fifth, with Russell and Antonelli in that order. So that is her top five. So no Verstappen there, which is interesting for sure. Vignesh, why don't you share your DNF and random prediction then?
My DNF would be Carlos Sainz, and it's an unpopular opinion, but I feel like for the last few wet races, Carlos hasn't been that great. He was unlucky in Silverstone, I'll give him that. I think he had a collision with Leclerc uh, towards the I think in sector 3 when Leclerc kind of like went on the wet patch and they both touched bang wheels and he had like floor damage. So, but given that there's rain on the cars, I don't expect Carlos to do well. So I can foresee a Carlos DNF coming as an option. And my random prediction would be Yuki Tsunoda makes Q3. Yeah, I back Yuki with McKee's at the wheel now. I feel like there might be some extra motivation, and given that his seat is on the line, like there's no guarantees heading into next year. I mean, if Verstappen leaves, then sure, but we don't even know that if that's going to happen or not. So I guess he'd probably be extra motivated, do well after a long break, reset after Silverstone, and hopefully get into Q3 after a long time.
It's definitely random enough, I'd say. Yuki has not done that on a consistent basis, so that's completely fair. Daniel, why don't you go next with your DNF and random prediction then?
For sure. Vignesh, I think that's a great point that you make on Sainz. Actually, he said recently that he used to have this reputation when he was younger for being a great driver in the wet. But I feel like it's kind of gone the other way in Formula One now, because I look back on wet races and all I see is Carlos Sainz shunts. So the ones that leap to mind are obviously Canada last year when he took out Alex Albon when he had the spin, and Japan 2022 when I think it was the first lap and he spun out on his own, which it was terrible conditions, but still. So yeah, you make a good point on that. Okay, my DNF for this race is the other Spaniard, Fernando Alonso, which is just vibes mostly. I do remember him spinning into the wall when it was raining in the 2023 sprint race, so maybe a repeat of that. But I'd also seen that he'd scored points in the last 4 Grand Prix and thought, no way that extends to 5. Not like Anwar, who thought it would extend to a 5th position. Random prediction is that the top 3 drivers from the sprint will all finish in the top 3 in the Grand Prix. So not necessarily the same order, but there will be top 3, which is maybe a bit of a cop-out because McLaren have had 3 1-2s in the last 4 Grand Prix, so maybe 2 of those positions are done. But from a sprint to a Grand Prix, that conversion's only happened 3 times, I think. Brazil 22, Baku 23, and Qatar 23, which makes it a 15% chance probability of that happening. But I don't care. I feel good about this one. I'm ready for it to come in.
I like the fact that you've quantified how random this is, because I would have given it to you anyway, but just to make sure that people understood that this was random enough, you've given me that statistic, so that's good. The Alonso thing, it would very much track if he would get the DNF as well, because he is ultimately the most unlucky driver on the grid, in his own words. So we'll see if the unluckiness kind of spreads to this weekend as well. In terms of my DNF, are we going to see another driver who's a rookie for my DNF? Absolutely. I've gone for Colapinto. Just again, no real thought behind it, except I think they're pretty clumsy. So I think he's going to be the DNF. And the random prediction here is that we're going to get 2 people with 5-second penalties. in the race specifically, which I feel is random enough. So 2 people getting 2 different drivers getting 5 seconds, pretty self-explanatory there. And moving on to Lucy's before we round out the show, is that she also thinks that Carlos Sainz is going to be the one to DNF. So, and Vignesh, you and Lucy are sharing a prediction somewhere. So that should fill you. I would say that doesn't fill you with much confidence, considering Lucy's track record with predictions. But you've made your bet, I guess. And her random prediction is another DNF related one, and that is a DNF on the first lap. I don't see a reason why this can't happen, particularly if it is wet. It may make La Source a pretty treacherous corner. So absolutely possible for that to happen. But that brings us to the end of our preview for the Belgian Grand Prix. I want to thank my 2 guests for coming on, Daniel and Vignesh. Thank you for sharing your time with me on the pod, and we'll see you guys at some point next week, where we will be reviewing the events of said Belgian Grand Prix, which hopefully is a really entertaining watch. So I've been your host. Thank you guys very much for listening or watching from your seats at home, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.